Welcome to Hail Varsity Radio, the voice of Husker Nation. Insight, opinion, expertise, with the biggest and best names talking Nebraska across the state. Join the show on Twitter at Hail Varsity and at Schmidt_radio. Call in at 402-466-ESPN or 1-800-825-5865. Here's Chris Schmidt.
Welcome to it. It's Tuesday here on Hail Varsity Radio, presented by the Nebraska Lottery. Chris Schmidt at an appointment this afternoon, so it's Elijah Herbel taking you through. What we got planned today is a best of Hail Varsity Radio, so we haven't got the chance to do one of these in a while. Some good stuff coming up. Trev Alberts, as well as Lars Anderson. But first, we're going to go back to June 30th, when we had Phil Steele on the program, and we're going to evaluate how accurate was Phil Steele's college football preview when he came back on the show. Here he is, Phil Steele.
Back into it. It's Hail Varsity Radio, presented by the Nebraska Lottery. Let's talk college football. Let's talk college football preview. And we say hi to Phil Steele, back on the show again. At PhilSteele042 is where you find him on Twitter, PhilSteele.com. And, of course, newsstands everywhere to get that college football 2021 preview. Phil, it's awesome to spend time with you again. How are you?
You know, I am doing great, Chris. So much better than last year at this time when we were wondering if we're even going to play football for the season. So it's a positive knowing that we got the schedules and we're playing football. One quick thing I want to point out to you is you mentioned the magazine's available everywhere. We did make a change this year. We're only at Barnes & Noble and Books A Million. So I want to save your listeners a little bit of gas money driving around looking for it. Only at Barnes & Noble and only at Books A Million this year. But I'm doing great. How about yourself, Chris?
You know, we're ready for some football in Lincoln. We're ready for football in Nebraska and ready for a winning season in Nebraska, Phil. As you look at Nebraska, let's start right there. And I know you go through every previous season. You put together what you put together and you've done for decades at the highest level. How did you even process COVID 2020 when you looked at other teams, let alone Nebraska?
Well, you know, some teams you could look at it and it was basically normal for them, where if you played 11, 12 games, didn't lose a lot of players to COVID, but those were more the exception to the rule. We had teams that played, like Miami of Ohio, I think played 3 games last year, had 3 of their games canceled. Teams had their season canceled like the Big Ten did, then brought back, played a different schedule. The COVID testing would have teams shorthanded for some games. There were some mismatches where teams were down 30 players. So, I mean, you really had to look at it on an individual basis. All I could say, Chris, is thank goodness we played college football. Thank goodness we crowned champions in each conference and crowned a national champ at the end of the year.
When we start out nationally, and Nick Saban, I still see the smile on his face with what his team accomplished, how loaded they were, but just the investment they put in, the buy-in to kind of soldier through COVID, and they wound up on top. As we take a national look, Phil, who's on your radar before we get to some Big Ten action? Usual suspects, I assume, as far as some of the favorites, some of the teams that are supposed to be in the playoff again.
Yeah, I went way out on a limb here, Chris. I went with Alabama out of the SEC, Clemson out of the ACC. How about Ohio State out of the Big Ten? And then their shocker, Oklahoma out of the Big 12. But I think there were 2 teams that are right on the doorstep of getting in there that aren't your normal names. One would be Georgia. I think when you look at Georgia, they open up with Clemson in the opener. If they win that, they'll be favored in all the rest of their games. They've got a very good SEC schedule. Only 3 SEC road games. They avoid Alabama, Texas A&M, and LSU out of the West. I think Georgia's got a chance to enter into the party this year. And then Texas A&M. And A&M was close last year. Remember Selection Sunday? Is it Ohio State? Is it Texas A&M? And Ohio State just barely beat them out. Talking to Coach Coach Fisher, even though they lose 4 offensive linemen, he felt that last year, that this year's offensive line would be more athletic than last year's offensive line, and perhaps even better. And they lose their quarterback, but I think Haynes King can come in and do what Kellen Mond did last year, and they get that game against Alabama at home on October the 9th. So if anybody's going to knock Alabama out of the SEC and out of the playoffs, I think Texas A&M or Georgia are your 2 best threats.
They are on the doorstep. A&M's always had insane talent, but for whatever reason, they stubbed their toe, and this goes back to the Big 12 and obviously into the SEC. But now you got Jimbo, a championship-winning coach there, to pair with that talent. Big things could happen in College Station. I love your Georgia take, too, especially with the fact there's just 3 road games for them, and there's not a vicious crossover for them in the SEC West. Phil, let's look at Big Ten action, and let's focus in on Nebraska. What's your feel? What's your read here as we go into year 4 of the Frost era? A little bit of a shakeup you probably knew about, and that is no more Bill Moose here in Lincoln as the athletic director. That happened last Friday.
Yeah, and it's Nebraska's a tough team to gauge because it could go either way. You look at the talent they have coming back. They've got 17 returning starters. The one thing I'll mention is everybody's got 16, 17, 18 returning starters. You know, you look at the Pac-12, for example. Colorado has 16 returning starters this year. You think, wow, that's probably second or third best in the conference. It's actually second worst in the conference. So everybody's got 16, 17, 18 starters back. When I look at Nebraska, I see this is clearly Scott Frost's most talented team. They've got to get Adrian Martinez to play like he did a couple of years ago, rather than what we've seen the last couple of years. A little concerned about the backup spot, losing Luke McCaffrey to Louisville and now to Rice, which, by the way, we captured in the magazine. We've got him as a starting quarterback at Rice this year. I think everybody else has him as a backup quarterback at Louisville. But the talent's there throughout. Nebraska's got a lot of positions that rank in my upper units, but the big question mark would have to be the schedule. And, you're going to be clearly an underdog when it comes to Oklahoma. By the way, love to see that rivalry renewed. I remember back in the 70s when they played the Irresistible Force versus Immovable Object. It was the game of all time. Johnny Rodgers with those punt return touchdown, just a great game. So I'm glad to see that rivalry renewed there. But other games will probably be an underdog in this year. Might be at Minnesota, Ohio State at home, at Wisconsin, even Iowa at home. And then there's toss-up games on the schedule. I think that traveling to Michigan State and Illinois, not going to be easy. Northwestern at home, not easy. Michigan at home, not easy. So there's a lot of games where they've been losing close games in the last couple of years. If they continue to lose close games, it's going to be a disappointing season. But if they can break through and start playing with some confidence, they can actually get to the plus side of the ledger. So it's one of those teams that I can see going either way this year.
Phil Steele's with us, Hail Varsity Radio college football preview. Can log on philsteele.com or head to Barnes & Noble and get your college football Bible for 2021. That's the story of a lot of Big Ten teams, Phil, is how are you in one possession games? How are your special teams units? And the thing that's just crushed Nebraska even before Frost and for years now has been the turnover bug. And is that a number as you do research and look at some of the data, the Nebraska turnover margin, does that jump out to you?
You know what? And this year, though, it jumps out to me in a positive way, because last year they were minus 11 turnovers in a shortened season. And I won't get into too many specifics, but I did a little formula, and because the turnover equals turnaround is generally based on a 12-game season. But in this case, if you had minus 8 in turnovers, you qualified for it, because if you only played 7 games, the amount of turnovers per game, etc. But anyway, Nebraska qualified for turnovers equals turnaround regardless. They had minus 11 turnovers last year, and what that says is generally teams that had negative double-digit turnovers one year have a better record the next year. And if you go back and look at Nebraska in the past, let's just say in the last 7 years, only once has Nebraska had double-digit turnovers, and that was back in 2015 when they were minus 12 in turnovers, and that year they went 6-7. Well, the next year they rebounded in 2016, went all the way up to 9-4. Why? Because the turnovers, which are somewhat of a luck thing, not necessarily, but it is a little bit of a luck factor. It switched the other way. And that was the first article I wrote for the magazine back 27 years ago. It's proven to be about a 75% success rate every single year. So Nebraska's got that working for them this year, the fact that they were minus 11 turnovers last year.
Phil Steele's with us, Hail Varsity Radio. Question mark for you with Nebraska here, schedule-wise, and you mentioned a lot of the coin flip games. Is there a barometer game for you on Nebraska's schedule, or is there, okay, they win this game, maybe it could flip this season?
I am going to say they need to win early. Nebraska has to get to that midpoint of the season. I'll use Michigan as your big game, I think. Okay. I think they need to beat Michigan at home. If they do, it could be a big thing. If at that point Nebraska gets to maybe 4-2 or 5-1, which is definitely a potential, then everything looks good. But you look at those final 5 games, they figure to be an underdog in 4 of the last 5 games. You know, Ohio State, Wisconsin, and Iowa are 3 powers in the Big Ten this year, and Minnesota's got to be played on the road. So as opposed to one specific game, I think let's just go ahead and use a litmus test and say if it's 3-3 at midseason, it's probably not going to turn out to be good. We need to have a winning record at midseason this year.
Phil, when you look at the rest of the West here, let's talk Iowa, Wisconsin, Minnesota, and Northwestern. I'm interested to see, if Purdue bounces back. They've got some offensive talent with Bell, obviously, and Bielema's back in the Big Ten. That's a monster opener for Nebraska at Illinois. It's a game they should win. I don't know that they will, but those teams that have been jockeying for that West Division, it's been Wisconsin's or it's been Northwestern's, but you've had good years from Minnesota. And Iowa's been really talented as well. From a pecking order standpoint, who edges out as your West favorite?
Well, I'm going to go, and first of all, I think that the West is very deep. Let me go to the bottom of it for starters, and take a look at Illinois. You mentioned Bielema's coming in. When is Brett Bielema at his best? When he's got a big veteran offensive line. I remember talking to Coach Lovie Smith last year going over the offensive line, and he said, Phil, we've got 5 NFL guys on the offensive line. And then I asked Coach Bielema this year. I said, you know what? Coach Smith felt he had 5 NFL guys on the offensive line. How do you feel? He's like, Phil, I think we have 5 NFL guys on the offensive line. And so if you've got 5 NFL guys on your offensive line, you're in good shape because they're all back this year, basically. They get the veteran quarterback and Brandon Peters. And that just shows you the depth of the West, because I picked them last, but as you touched on, that's a dangerous game in the opener. But for my number 1 pick in the West this year, I'm on with Wisconsin, and I feel pretty good about that. I think Wisconsin I rate as my number 2 surprise team in the country. A surprise team is a non-top 10 team that I think can contend for a playoff spot, and Wisconsin has 17 returning starters coming back. Now, Nebraska didn't get to play Wisconsin last year, but if you watch any Wisconsin games, they didn't run the football like they normally do. They only averaged, as a team, 3.9 yards per carry last year, which is definitely not your typical 5 or 6 yards per carry. They've got a veteran offensive line coming back. They've got what I call 4 VHT running backs this year, led by Jalen Berger, who emerged at the end of last season. I think the run game's gets back to normal for Wisconsin. They've got Graham Mertz at quarterback. He had 20 at 21 in the opener last year, and then sort of tallied off. I think he'll be one of the best quarterbacks in the country. And defensively, they've got practically the whole unit back, including my number 6 linebackers in the country and number 10 DBs. And then you look at their schedule. Their road games are against Minnesota, Rutgers, Purdue, and Illinois. All 4 winnable. They play Notre Dame and Chicago, but I think this team has got a chance of potentially running the table this year. And if they make it to the Big Ten title game, Chris, they've given Ohio State a battle in each of the last 2 Big Ten title games. So they're my number 2 surprise team in the country.
Phil Steele's with us. A few more minutes. Hail Varsity Radio, the Phil Steele College Football Preview 2021. Get to a Barnes & Noble or log on philsteele.com and get your issue today. As we look at the East, who do you think challenges Ohio State? And let me follow that up with, does Indiana drop off, or do they continue that ascent? Because, man, they were fun last year.
Oh, they sure were a lot of fun. I don't know if anybody's going to really challenge Ohio State this year because they get Penn State at home in a big game, and I still think they've got a slight edge on Indiana talent-wise, or a decent edge there. But I've got Penn State coming in second in the East. They are my number one most improved team in the country. And keep in mind, they were number 7 in the AP poll at the start of last year. Lost their first 5 games, but it wasn't because they were getting outplayed at the line of scrimmage. You go back to that Indiana game that Penn State lost last year, they had a 488 to 211 yard edge. Now, how many games do you lose where you've got that massive of a yardage edge? But Indiana let their running back score a touchdown. They got the 2-point conversion controversial at the end, and they lost. I think Penn State gets back to close to double-digit wins, if not double-digit wins this year, coming off a losing season. But Tom Allen's doing a fantastic job at Indiana, and this might be his best team yet. He needs to keep his quarterback healthy, and that's Michael Penix Jr. If Michael Penix Jr. is healthy, they've got the running backs, they've got the receivers, DJ Matthews, Freifogel, Miles Marshall, Peyton Hendershot. It's one of the better receiving groups in the entire country. The defense, Tom Allen knows defense. He's got my number 5 set of linebackers with Micah McFadden, Marcelio Ball-McCray, who missed last year with injury, Cam Jones, and then in the secondary, I rate them number 7 in the country, led by a couple of All-American candidates in Tywan Mullen and Devon Matthews. So this is a very talented Indiana team that I've actually pegged ahead of Michigan this year, and I think that they're a challenger for that number 2 spot in the East.
That back 7 sounds dynamite for Indiana. I know it's a little bit tougher schedule for them this year, but they've got a lot back, and Tom Allen, man, those kids love him, and they play well. I'll be anxious to talk with him at Big Ten Media Days coming up. Phil Steele's with us here on Hail Varsity Radio. Phil, as we say goodbye, yay or nay, does Nebraska get to a bowl game this year?
Yeah, I am. I'm a coin flip there, Chris. If they are 4-2 at midseason, yes. Okay. How's that?
Phil, it's awesome to get caught up. We'll chat again soon, and thanks for giving us a few minutes with Hail Varsity.
Chris, I always enjoy talking football with you, my friend. You know that. So thanks for having me on.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
It's Elijah Herbel back in here for a best of Hail Varsity Radio. You just heard from Phil Steele as he was previewing his college football preview. Pretty on the money with Nebraska, a little bit off on Indiana, a little bit off on Wisconsin. Interesting to hear that one again. Next, we got Trev Alberts for you in a 2-parter. This goes back to our YouTube Tuesday series from last year. Trev Alberts talking UCLA 1994.
Back with you, Hail Varsity Radio, presented by the Nebraska Lottery. It's YouTube Tuesday time, and we welcome in a College Football Hall of Famer, Nebraska Hall of Famer, the Butkus Award winner in '93, and the athletic director at the University of Nebraska, Omaha. We say hi again to Trev Alberts. Trev, how's your Tuesday going?
It's going quite well. Thank you very much.
Well, appreciate your time. And, Trev, what a magical season '93 was for Nebraska. A chance to win it all, undefeated going into the Orange Bowl. And let's go back to camp before we get to the UCLA game. And, as a senior, you guys had built up, and you had a pretty good squad, a little young on offense, but a pretty vaunted defense. How are you feeling as one of the team leaders going into that senior year?
Yeah, I think one of the things that often gets overlooked and maybe missed is while the previous Orange Bowl, we lost by a couple touchdowns to Florida State. That was my junior year. I really think we could feel that we were closing the gap. We could feel that we had some, as you mentioned, some young talent. We had some veteran leadership, some hard workers, some character. But we also had some young emerging talent, and so the gap was closing. And that whole off season, I think we started to feel pretty good about the fact that we had a chance to be a really good football team. We had guys like Lance Lundberg and Gerald Armstrong. John Reese was a captain with me. So a good veteran group of leaders from the '89 class, and then the Lawrence Phillips and Tommy Frazier's and some of the young cats that were coming in. We really thought we were going to have a good football team.
How did you feel about the shift, the switch from the 5-2 to the 4-3? I know the result, but it was still a transition. In '93, correct me if I'm wrong, was that the first year you guys switched it?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I was ecstatic. To be totally frank, I graduated early and really, really enjoyed playing football, especially at a place like Nebraska. You know, the fans made our experience so amazing. But I had kind of thought that and had wondered whether I would play my senior year, only that I had some other goals outside of football, and I was a okay player, I guess, as a junior. But when Coach Samuel and Coach McBride sort of informed us that we were going to be going full time to the 4-3, which, you know, we had used. A lot of people probably remember the 52-7 game against Colorado and Lincoln over Halloween in '92. And then the following week when we played Kansas, we predominantly played that dime 4-3 look, and that was just an awful lot of fun. And so when they communicated that they were going to go full time, move Eddie Stewart into a linebacker role and just try to get more speed on the field, that was very, very intriguing to all of us, and I think was part of our confidence boost that we were going to play a style on defense that really fit our personalities, very aggressive, and we're going to take some calculated risks, but we were going to get after people. And you know, as a defensive player, that's your mindset anyway. And being able to let loose and really try to wreak havoc on opposing offenses is an awful lot of fun.
Trev Alberts with us, Hail Varsity Radio, YouTube Tuesday. Trev, I want to follow up. I didn't know that you were not that jacked about a senior season until you just said so. Was it, I don't know, take me through you had different goals. I completely respect that. I know you were a standout student, but did that defensive switch kind of make things fun again, or did you lose passion for it? It kind of explained to me the tug of war that was going on.
Oh, I don't want to in any way insinuate that I had lost passion. I loved playing at Nebraska. I don't know. I just kind of assumed, I went to University of Nebraska to get my degree, and I played 4 years. I had never, Chris, thought about playing in the NFL. I'd never thought about, I academically was on track, and so I'm not suggesting that it was a real tug of war. I had only kind of thought about, and I'd had a couple of conversations with Coach Samuel, and I think it was at one point when he said, Trev, we're going to go to the 4-3. I think you're really going to like it because I think you can play in the NFL. And I just had never allowed myself perhaps to start to think that way, and so that was obviously the catalyst to get moving forward.
Thanks for clearing that up for me. But, hey, it worked out, man. You had an incredible senior season, Butkus Award winner. And let's go to that Saturday. I remember watching it. We always kind of rotated as a kid where we watched the Nebraska game. And, the superstitious type. And whoever's TV was undefeated is whose living room we ended up in. And until it didn't happen. And what was that UCLA game? I remember just how I was expecting UCLA to chuck the football. I mean, that goes back to kind of the Pac-12 or Pac-10 at the time stereotype. But UCLA had a really good run attack, and that what a win and what a stand the defense had in the second half. And going into that game. What were your thoughts? What were you thinking about the Bruins as it was kind of the first road test of the year?
Well, I just remember, a couple things. First of all, I just remember there was about 12 or 15,000 people dressed in red. It's one thing to have a lot of support, maybe when you're in Ames or in Manhattan, Kansas, or something where our fans can drive relatively easy. I just was really struck when we went out to warm up about what made Nebraska really special was here we are, all the way in California, and there's only 50,000 people there. So it's not like, they were grounded out. I mean, it literally felt like half the stadium was Big Red fans. And so I just remember that. I remember, us talking as a team and coaches talking to us about, I think everybody knew that this was going to be a real test. We knew that they had a lot of skill and talent on their team. And, we were trying to get ourselves into that national conversation of being a team that really could compete at a high level, maybe play again for a national championship. And so this was an opportunity for us To play against a team that had a very good coaching staff. Terry Donahue was very well respected. And so, yeah, as you pointed out, they had some pretty good players. They had J.J. Stokes, I think, at wide receiver. At the end of the day, it really was about their running attack. And, Skip Hicks had a tremendous day, and the Shaman Shaw also had a really nice day. But when it really counted and when it really mattered, our team found a way. And I really think that game gave us a lot of confidence. We didn't play well. We had 4 turnovers. They outrushed us. They held the ball longer than us. But yet, defensively, we got pressure on the quarterback. It wasn't just me. We had 6 sacks as a team, and that's in spite of their running. So we just like the rest of that season. We stayed poised. We didn't panic, and we found a way. We also had a lot of injuries going into that game. Tommy wasn't great. Damon Benning wasn't feeling well, and so we had a lot of injuries. But yeah, we just hung in there, never quit, stayed the course, and found a way to win.
Trev Alberts with us, YouTube Tuesday. Our game is the Nebraska road win at UCLA in 93, 14-13. That UCLA team ended up taking the Pac-12 and playing Wisconsin in the Rose Bowl, and Nebraska able to put enough defensive stops together. I remember watching that, and Damon's out, and Calvin Jones isn't suited up or didn't play because he was still nursing a knee injury, and it was a homecoming for Lawrence, and man, the sophomore delivered. He was incredible. Frazier gutted it out. But do you recall how many times UCLA either recovered deep in Nebraska territory or they got a drive, but you guys got to stop? I think the third down numbers were pretty bad for UCLA. You guys were money on third down.
Yeah, I don't remember the exact specifics of where it was on the field, but for some reason my recollection is that our turnovers happened in, just terrible. We were going in to score. There were, opportunities, and so that's what I meant we didn't play all that well. But I really think that games like that, and we talked about it after the game, while it's not pretty, if you can find a way to get through that, it actually gives you an awful lot of confidence because I remember we watched the film, obviously, as a team, and then you break out into your offense and defense and then into your individuals. And all of us, there were a lot of plays left on the field. And so, you start thinking, here we are on the road against a Pac-12 team with an awful lot of, Jonathan Ogden was on that team. Jameer Miller, who was a finalist for the Butkus Award with me, he was on that team. So you're talking about a team that was a physical team, very good team, on the road. We turned the ball over 4 times, and they have 0 turnovers, and we still find a way to win the game. We took a lot of confidence out of that. Now, I don't think nationally a lot of people were really all that enamored by the 1-point win on the road by the 8th-ranked team in the country. But I think when you delve a little bit deeper, there was a lot of positives that come out of that type of a win.
A few more minutes here. Trev Alberts with us, YouTube Tuesday, Hail Varsity Radio. Important road win for Nebraska. You mentioned the confidence. And, Trev, you finished with 3 sacks. I think I got my Sports Illustrated in the mail a week later, and you were the Defensive Player of the Week in Sports Illustrated for your performance. 10 solo tackles. Were you in the zone, or did you just kind of find the football?
Well, I don't know. To be totally honest with you, Toby Wright probably should have been the Sports Illustrated Player of the Week. He had 13 tackles and had a lot of big plays. I don't know. We when you become a senior and you don't have a lot of opportunities left, there just seems to be a little bit different approach. And I remember my mother and father made the trip, and it was really special to me. That was as far as they ever ventured away from Cedar Falls, Iowa. And, and then there were other little conversations that were motivational to me. Coach Samuel, pulled me aside. And so for those of us that were seniors and were perhaps hoping that we could be considered for some awards, both academically and athletically, and then perhaps even NFL scouts, they were very honest with us that there'll be a certain portion of the whole region of the U.S. This will be the only time that they see you as a player. And so, I know our team was, and I know I certainly was just really motivated to. It was a beautiful day. It was just, wonderful. You're playing UCLA, a historical team, in an incredible environment. There's 15,000 Nebraskans at the game. How do you not get excited for that?
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Trev Alberts, YouTube Tuesday with us. We're talking Nebraska, UCLA, the 14-13 win against a Rose Bowl-bound Bruins squad from the Pac-12. Great defense, enough offense, gutty performance overall by the team. Talked to Coach Samuel a couple of times in my career. Obviously, you got to play for him, but that guy was as good as it gets, it sounds like, with the Russians at Nebraska. And he got you guys to kind of turn up when you needed to, and just excellent position of Nebraskans that, I mean, you talk about that NFL, and you were a guy that went to the league, and guys before you went to the league, and guys after you from that Russian spot went to the league, and he's one of the just unsung guys. I mean, Nebraska fans know how important he is, but he always had you guys flying around the football. Trev, when we talk about importance and we talk a little bit about that confidence boost, wasn't your first close win in '93? You had to go to Boulder. You had that one in Kansas that was a one-pointer. Did that Saturday in the Rose Bowl give you confidence and make you feel, okay, we'll find a way to get this thing handled later on in the year? Did you guys ever waver, or did you feel like, all right, we're kind of a team of destiny?
Well, I think it kind of built upon itself a little bit. And real quick, first, I do want to say I 100% agree with you on Tony Samuel. His brilliance was people and understanding what made them tick. He wasn't a rah-rah, didn't yell and scream and get you all, but he knew what it was that motivated you. And what motivated me was different than Broderick Thomas or Jeff Mills or Travis Hill or Grant Wistrom, but his genius was understanding it and then using it to benefit the team. But, I would say, Chris, I think that was just kind of the personality that our football team kind of took on. I mean, we were a bunch of fighters, and we were never going to be out of a game. And you look at the ebb and flow of a football game, and momentum is such a big component. You look at even in the Orange Bowl when we lost to Florida State, there were multiple times where we could have probably said, well, at least we played them close. We weren't embarrassed. It wasn't a blowout. But just a even-keeled, poised, hardworking, resilient group that just kept fighting. And it wasn't one person or one side of the ball. I mean, it was all of us. I mean, Byron missed a field goal against UCLA, came back and made an important one. UCLA missed a couple. So that's just football, and your ability to stay focused, keep working, stay together, stay unified. That was just our team. And I can honestly tell you that I don't recall one time in my senior year that our team, we never, ever, the thought of us losing really never even crossed our mind. And we just always knew we were going to win the game. Perhaps it wouldn't be quite as big of a margin as we had hoped, but losing was not something that was even part of our thinking. And I think that's part of, you earn that through overcoming those barriers and obstacles and finding a way to win those close games like we did at the start against UCLA, and then just really carried on throughout the course of that season.
Trev, as we say goodbye, and this was a lot of fun, and thanks for taking the time here on the show, who are some of the lasting friendships you've had with that team? You mentioned the class of '89, and that's a foundational class for what you guys did as juniors and seniors, and what came after you. Who are some of the guys that kind of poured that concrete, so to speak, for you and for the team with Nebraska football?
Well, I mentioned a couple of them already, but, Lance Lundberg, did a lot of battles with him down in the old Schulte Field House one-on-one from Wausau, Nebraska. Gerald Armstrong, the epitome of a walk-on who had a dream, had a work ethic, and had an awful lot of talent and ability, and turned himself into a starter and a captain. I think he had, at one point, he had like 7 receptions, and 6 of them were touchdowns. Our senior year. The guy was a walking touchdown down around the goal line. But John Reese, Ernie Beeler was a real good friend of mine. Of course, Travis Hill was a year older.
Yeah.
Toby Wright was an incredible. Just a lot of those guys. Terry Keneally, Kevin Raymakers. Just so many. You hate to start mentioning names because, of course, you don't mention all of them, and then you run into them around town and say, "Oh, you don't remember me." The fact of the matter is that we had some characters, and certainly none of us, including me, were perfect. But by and large, I thought we had a good group of young men who were brought together with one common goal, really kind of motivated and pushed along by the state and our alumni and fans who cared so deeply about the university and the program, and sort of helped us will our way to some victories that perhaps we maybe even shouldn't have had. But that's what made playing at the University of Nebraska so much fun. Football at the University of Nebraska matters, and it matters just beyond the wins and losses. It matters to the state, it matters to the local economy, and it just flat out matters. So when you want to be a part of something, you want to be a part of something that everybody's all in on, unified, and working together. And I think, by and large, that's the kind of team we had. The young men who weren't behind that type of thinking, they didn't last very long in the program. So, we talked about that class in '89, Chris. I mean, I think we had 25 or 6 recruits. 8 or 9 of them were gone after the first year. I'm not suggesting they were all gone because they didn't fit our culture. I'm saying, and many of them were the highest, but not everybody made it. It was very demanding. It was very difficult. And Coach would tell us that if you do see it through and you are a finisher, great things will happen for you. And some guys didn't. And so the guys that did make it, did fight through that, either the freshman team or then being a red shirt and getting beat up a little bit, ultimately got to have some of the rewards at the end. And those were the guys that got to play against games like UCLA. So a lot of fun. A lot of fun.
That family-type atmosphere and mentality and common goal. And Coach McBride, when he's with us, references the pit or the one-on-ones and how you'd be going at Lundberg, not you specifically, just as an example you just touched on, and how, it brought the best out of each of you, and then you could just leave it at the practice field, and you guys were good to go to hang out at the training table. That's pretty unique.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, but that's absolutely true. Coach McBride is right, but part of the reason we could do that is because of how they talked to us. I mean, they talked to us like men. They communicated well with us. They were very transparent. We talked about those kinds of things. We talked about, literally, in a sense, going to war against each other, even though your teammate in practice to get better. And I'll tell you, I didn't like him at all in practice. In fact, I couldn't stand him. I certainly didn't like Will Shields either. But then at the end, when it's training table or study hall, we're on the same team. And it was about helping each other get better, being great teammates to one another. And then, frankly, Chris, once the game started, the reality was it was kind of fun to play against guys and realize that, the best players I played against were the guys I played against in practice every day. And so I knew I never went into a game thinking that this guy is going to be something that I've never seen before. Every time I played against somebody in college football, I had played against somebody equal or superior in talent, technique, and work ethic at the University of Nebraska in practice.
That's pretty powerful. Trev Alberts, YouTube Tuesday, Nebraska, UCLA 93. Trev, best to you and your family. Stay safe and healthy, and thanks for a few minutes with us here on YouTube Tuesday.
Certainly. Have a great day. Thank you, Chris.
And we're back.
Fellas, think we could listen to the radio
on Hail Varsity Radio, presented by the Nebraska Lottery.
Yes! That's awesome! Rolling through a Tuesday here, Hail Varsity Radio, presented by the Nebraska Lottery. It's a best of Tuesday, as Chris out this afternoon at an appointment. Also going to be out tomorrow. So tomorrow it's going to be Will Wilson and myself filling in on Hail Varsity Radio as we take you through a Nebraska bye week. Going to continue getting your reaction to Nebraska, Minnesota. A look ahead to what's coming up this weekend in the Big Ten schedule, as well as a look ahead all the way up to Purdue coming up about 10 days from now. So a lot to get through this week. As I said, rolling through a best of Hail Varsity Radio today. So we had Trev Alberts just now. We had Phil Steele leading off hour one. Still some good stuff coming your way as Jimmy Burrow, father of Joe Burrow, former defensive coordinator at Ohio. He's going to be with us leading off hour one. Our interview going back to July 15th. That's when we sat down with Jimmy as we discussed Frank Solich's retirement as well as Joe Burrow's return from that ACL injury. That's coming up to lead off hour two. And we also have our sit down with Lars Anderson as his book, Season in the Sun, detailing the Tampa Bay Super Bowl run last year. Looks like Tampa Bay, barring any injuries, is going to be on another run towards a Super Bowl this year. So we're going to sit down with Lars Anderson to recap his book, which detailed that season for Tampa Bay. That's all coming up next hour. But man, listen to that Trev Alberts interview. Just really confirms to me that Trev Alberts knows what he's doing in that athletic director role. He gets Nebraska football. He's going to get this thing right, regardless of it's Scott Frost at the helm or not. Obviously, Scott Frost hot seat talk has cooled immensely this season. The talk regarding his assistants has heated up, though, in recent weeks, especially after that Minnesota game. We'll get some thoughts on that coming up tomorrow. Again, it's Will Wilson and myself filling in for Chris. Hoping Chris will be back with Hail Varsity Radio on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday of this week. Again, Will Wilson and myself, Elijah Herbel, coming your way tomorrow. Before we get out of here this hour, it's time to remind you that there are over 1,500 crashes each year in Nebraska involving an impaired driver. Driving drunk, buzzed, or high is never acceptable, and law enforcement officers are working day and night to stop it before any more people are killed or injured. If you're going to drive, don't drink. If you do drink, make sure you designate a sober driver or get yourself a ride share. You need to get a ride because a DUI costs more than you think. A message brought to you by the Nebraska Department of Transportation Highway Safety Office. In addition, it's also good to remind you that nearly 70% of people in fatal crashes in Nebraska are not wearing a seatbelt. If used properly, a seatbelt can reduce the risk of fatal injury in a crash by up to 60%. Your best defense in any crash is to buckle up. Another message brought to you by the Nebraska Department of Transportation Highway Safety Office. Again, more Best of Hail Varsity coming your way next hour. Jimmy Burrow as well as Lars Anderson. But before we get out of here this hour, it's your chance to win tickets to Joe Rogan down at Pinnacle Bank Arena. This one coming your way a week from Friday. That is October 29th. We had our winner, Mike, yesterday win his tickets to Joe Rogan. This is for a pair of tickets at that show at Pinnacle Bank Arena, free of charge for you and a guest. It's going to be a great show. Joe Rogan, host of the Joe Rogan Experience, a commentator in UFC, and obviously a stand-up comedian. His stand-up act coming to Lincoln. It's your chance to get some tickets. We're going to be taking caller number 7 here. Caller number 7 will get their chance to win. 402-466-3776. That's 402-466-ESPN wins a pair of Joe Rogan tickets.
Welcome to Hail Varsity Radio, the voice of Husker Nation. Insight, opinion, expertise, with the biggest and best names talking Nebraska across the state. Join the show on Twitter at Hail Varsity and at Schmidt_radio. Call in at 402-466-ESPN or 1-800-825-5865. Here's Chris Schmidt.
The Best of Hail Varsity rolls on with our interview with Jimmy Burrow back on July 15th.
Back into it. It's Hail Varsity Radio, presented by the Nebraska Lottery. We going to talk some football here, some Nebraska, some Coach Solich, and, of course, some Joe Burrow. We welcome in proud dad and standout Husker and, of course, defensive coordinator with Ohio for a number of years, Coach Jimmy Burrow. Coach, thanks for the time. Let me ask you this. How's vacation? How's vacation going?
Well, it was great. And then Coach Solich retired yesterday, so I've done my share of Zoom interviews and radio interviews over the last couple days. But that's all good. Anything that I can do to say great things about Coach Solich, I'm willing to do. But and you can still in Florida, you can still do those things either by the beach or by the pool. So I'm good.
Yeah, beach, pool, golf course. It's warm. I mean, it's nice. Jimmy Burroughs with us. You have such a great relationship with Coach Solich, his defensive coordinator for a number of years. And what's Frank meant to Ohio in your eyes? Can you put into words his time at Ohio U?
Well, he changed the culture of Ohio University football, and in doing so, was able to promote Ohio University to another level. Also, with all the publicity that he brought to Ohio and the success of our team, all of that is really helped Ohio University and of course the football program. But when we first got there, I'm not sure our understanding that the kids didn't really believe they could win, and that's what Coach Solich is so great at. It didn't take long for them to buy into what Coach was bringing to the table, and we went into our first home game believing we could beat Pittsburgh on national television, and we did. So the culture that he's changed and set in place for the future of Ohio football and Coach Alban is it's unmatched anywhere for that matter. And we're going to miss him there in Athens and with the football program. But as I said, he's leaving it in good hands, and he's leaving it in a good place.
Coach Jimmy Burroughs with us, Hail Varsity Radio, remembering Coach Solich as what he did at Ohio. And a lot of Nebraska fans still think fondly of Coach Solich as a player and as a coach. Coach Burrow, with Frank, not to get too into the weeds here, none of my business, but from a health standpoint, I know Frank's 77, but he can do more push-ups than most 30-year-olds. He's in incredible shape. But from a health standpoint, is this the right time, in your opinion, for Coach to be stepping down, for Coach Solich to step away?
Well, since he's doing it and he's made that decision, then I'm going to say he believes it's the right time. Mm-hmm. And as you know, and most everybody that has a relationship to him, he doesn't share a lot of things personally, even with privately with his closest friends and people that he really trusts. But I know that there's a reason that he's chosen to do it, and again, if he says it's the right time, then that's good enough for me.
Jimmy Burroughs with us. Jimmy, what did you think when you made the jump from North Dakota State to Ohio? And North Dakota State, incredible program. You also a lot of years at Washington State and Iowa State. Also your career, of course, in Lincoln. But what was that experience like for you with Ohio?
Well, Coach Alban had joined us at North Dakota State, so Coach Solich, he'd actually come to a game and watched us play. I think Cal Poly and in his year off, and we certainly had a good football team and offensively and defensively, and so when he took the job at Ohio, he offered Tim the offensive coordinator job and me the defensive coordinator job, and we knew that from visiting with him that he was really that year off had re-energized him and really got that competitive spirit going again, and he was very optimistic, and I've been around him a lot in recruiting, and he does a great job selling his program, and without us knowing really anything about Ohio University, he didn't have to sell us on Ohio University. He just had to sell us that it was the right place for him, and knowing that he bought in, made a big difference to Tim and I, and we joined him. But even when we got there, we weren't really prepared for where the program was. But we still thought with Coach Solich's leadership that we could turn that thing around fairly quickly. And to me, to join with Coach Solich, I mean, he'd been so big part of our our family, coaching Jamie, coaching Dan, and then getting me really back into Division I coaching football at Nebraska after my tenure at Iowa State. So, we hit a ride with who we thought was not only a great football coach, but a great person, and it really played out very positively for me and Tim and both of our families.
Jimmy Burroughs with us here on Hail Varsity Radio, longtime assistant, defensive coordinator, associate head coach for Ohio under Coach Solich. Coach stepping down yesterday. And last thought on Coach Solich, Coach Burrow. I mean, Solich was such an incredible recruiter. Obviously, a phenomenal position coach, really good head coach as well. But Frank was so good at recruiting, not only eyeing talent, but he just seemed to be one of many high-level recruiters Coach Osborne had. And what stuck out to you about Frank's ability to recruit? And I just think all the Jersey guys he connected with.
Well, I think when he stepped into a home, he became just his personality and his professionalism. Right away, the families felt comfortable. The recruit felt comfortable, and he's not a big self-promoter, but just listening to him sell, whether it was Nebraska football or Ohio University football, I think he trusted him, and that's a big part of recruiting. And I've been through it as a coach and as a parent, and that's a big part of a decision made by a young man is can you trust the head coach, and can you trust what he's telling us and selling, and he was tremendous at that. I never saw him use notes. I never saw him as we were going to the house in a car review any notes. It was just Coach Solich being Coach Solich, and always was well prepared in his mind. What he had to get done in the home, and it was. I learned so much every time I was in a visit with him, and even the up until now, he's still. They got a great recruiting class that just came in, and he was still on top of his game.
That's impressive. Jimmy Burroughs with us, Hail Varsity Radio, longtime assistant at Ohio, Husker standout. So, Coach, thoughts on Trev? That was Coach Solich retires. Trev is having a presser at 11. I got to do a one-on-one with Trev yesterday. It was great to get caught back up with him. And as a Husker, what do you think of Trev making his way back to Lincoln?
Right. Well, first of all, full disclosure, Bill Moose and I were very close friends. We worked together at Washington State University. He was our Cougar Club director when I worked for Jim Walden there for 7 years. So, I was excited when Bill took the job, and I was disappointed when he did leave. But knowing Trev, he had spent a week with us at Ohio University once, sitting in on our defensive meetings many years ago, and got to know him. And I think it's great that somebody who played football at Nebraska, former player, is now running the program, and I'm excited about the direction that I know he'll take all sports, and certainly a former player has a lot of insight in what made that program successful under Coach Osborne and under Coach Solich, and Coach Scott Frost is going to get it going, and I'm sure Trev has some ideas about all that, and he's proven that he can manage an entire sports athletic department and done it well. So I think it's great, and we certainly wish him good luck. We have 3 former players in our family with me, Jamie, and Dan, and my wife now is from Nebraska, and so we're excited about it. I think it's a good hire.
with Bill Moose, and we always, every chance I had time to talk with Bill Moose, I always enjoyed it. And you think Bill's just going to enjoy retirement on the ranch? What do you see from Bill here in the future?
I think that's probably it. I haven't spoken with him other than a text or two since he left Nebraska, but I know he's already been close to retiring several years ago, I think, before he took the Nebraska job. So he's looking forward, I'm sure, to the ranch in Washington, and you know, he's put in a lot of great years at a lot of great universities and been very successful. I think in his mind, he's leaving Nebraska in a better place than it was, and he's I'm sure he's content with what he accomplished there.
Jimmy, are you? I know you're locked in on Joe and his season. We'll get there in 1 second, but are you going to get to any Nebraska games? You just going to watch from afar? How do you treat the Nebraska element of football during the fall?
For the last game, we did we were guests with Bill and his athletic director suite for the Ohio State game.
Okay.
So we got a chance to be there a few years ago. Joe wasn't at Ohio State anymore, so I was fully invested in rooting for the Huskers against the Buckeyes. So it didn't turn out very well, but we'll try to get back. You know, Jamie, my son, lives in Omaha, and most of my wife's relatives are throughout the state there. So I'd like to get back. You know, I got that particular day. I got to visit with Coach Osborne, and that was great. You know, so and I still stay in touch with some of the players. So maybe one of these reunions. I think there's one coming up here this fall. Maybe I'll try to get back. I still would like to come to some games, but I like to go to the Bobcat games. Still will. I want to go to LSU and see all the Bengal games. So if there's fans this year, I'm going to be busy.
You are. You get an RV and an airfare, and you're a happy guy going to football games every weekend. Coach Jimmy Burroughs with us. Last thought, how's Joe doing? I just loved watching him play ball and felt so sick with the injury. But man, oh man, what tenacity he's gone after the rehab with, and just seeing some stuff on social media, he looks pretty strong. And I know he's been throwing. How are things with Joe?
He's progressing well. He's able to work out down here with us on vacation with his strength coach. You know, he's not 100%, but he's moving in that direction. His goal is to start the first game, and we think he's on track to do that. I mean, there's over 2 months until first game against the Vikings, so he participated in mini camp and the OTAs, and was able to do most everything. Certainly, you know, there were certain drills he was limited in, and he plans on the 27th, I believe, of July to again pick up where he left off in the last mini camp. And you know, they're excited, and we're excited again. We only got to go to 4 games last year, so we're planning on, I think there's 17 this year, plus the playoffs, right? So yeah. We're going to a lot. One last thing about Coach Solich, he was the first to offer Joe as a quarterback. He takes a lot of pride in saying he was the first, and I haven't mentioned this a lot over the years, but if Ohio State would not have probably offered, Joe had many Power 5 offers, but he loved the Bobcats. I think if it hadn't been for Ohio State, he'd have probably played for Coach and became a Bobcat back then. But
wow,
you know, it turned out good for him at LSU, and the Bengals. You know, another Nebraskan, Zach Taylor. He loves Coach Taylor, and I've had some conversations with him. I knew him when he was at the University of Cincinnati, so. I've known him for several years, but he should be good to go for that first game.
Well, we're looking forward to it. We're really cheering for Joe, obviously, and of course Zach, and big Bengal fans with Joe. Jimmy, you take care. Enjoy your vacation. Coach, thanks for a few minutes today.
All right. Go Bengals, go Bobcats, and go Huskers.
And now,
back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Back with you, it's Hail Varsity Radio, presented by the Nebraska Lottery, and we say hi to native Nebraskan, Lincolnite, and he's down in Alabama with the Jay Barker Show, 20 New York Times best-selling books, and another one I feel like's on the way. We say hi to Lars Anderson at Lars Anderson 71. Lars, how are you, man? It's been a while.
It's been a while, Chris. Good to catch up. Good to hear your voice. Knocking out book after book here.
You have a real fantastic offering for football fans. I know Nebraska fans will be all over this as well with the Levante David and Ndamukong Suh and Khalil Davis connection. But the Tampa Bay Bucks championship run, a season in the sun, the inside story of Bruce Arians, Tom Brady, and the making of a champion. This is fantastic. Lars, let's start off with this project and how it kind of materialized for you.
Yeah, so Bruce and I wrote a book together in 2017 called The Quarterback Whisperer, and our editor at the time was at a smaller house and a smaller publishing house in New York, and since then he's moved on to HarperCollins. As the Bucks were progressing through the playoffs, I reached out to Bruce and said, hey, would you be willing to do something if you guys win? And he was like, yeah, absolutely. So I wrote a short email to our editor, and he said, okay, well, let's just wait and see what happens in the game. All right, so they blow out the Chiefs 31-9. Then I just wrote probably just a 3-page memo kind of outlining the vision for the book. You know, I was going to be the solo author on it, and Bruce would help me with access to coaches, to players, just basically open doors that wouldn't be open to any other reporter. Of course, for that, Bruce is compensated something. Was able to put together a book deal literally within about a week. You know, it normally takes, months and months and months for these things to develop, and it usually requires a book proposal anywhere from 50 to 80 pages. And here I just write this quick 4-page memo, and we got a very lucrative deal. And the only problem was that I had 9 weeks to write it. Normally takes me 18 months to write a book. And so I just, I got in my car, got my dog, and went down to Tampa. Drove like 10 hours and just sort of camped in Tampa at a hotel close to Bruce's house for, a couple weeks, basically. And just interviewed as many people as possible, and then just started putting together the narrative. And it really is, it's absolutely fascinating how they landed Brady, how difficult it was for Brady to learn the Arians offense, how in many ways the Arians offense runs counter to everything that Tom ever did in New England. The New England offense, it's referred to as the Ron Earhart/Ray Perkins offense, and it was then tweaked by Charlie Weiss and modernized right when Tom got there in 2000. But still, it's really sort of a death by 1,000 cuts. I mean, Tom loves the short throws to the running backs, just the short stuff over the middle. He's not at heart, he's not a risk taker. He kind of views things through the prism of what can I do while minimizing risk, realizing my own limitations and realizing where the ball is on the field, what the down and distance is, what the score is. Well, BA is the complete opposite. He's like, look, if it is 3rd and 1 and we got the ball at our own 9-yard line and you see our best wide receiver lined up to the outside in press coverage, there's no over-the-top safety help, I want you to audible from a run play where we're probably going to get the first down to 88 go, which is Bruce's favorite play. It's just a straight go route. And so this was just a foreign concept to Tom Brady. And also the verbiage is different. And so it's almost just like he had to learn a whole new language. And in a way, I think that what made this season so special, and by most metrics, by the way, Chris, Tampa Bay went from, in terms of team merchandise sales, from, I think, 28th in the league to number 1. They had an increase of 2,500% from 1 year ago to about like last week. And of course, it's all because of Brady. But I think Brady became, and correct me if I'm wrong, and again, I'm so close to it, it's hard for me to have perspective. But I think Brady became more relatable this year. He showed a humanness. He showed frailty. He showed weakness. And it revealed that he wasn't just the guy, whether it was true or not, the perception was everything had been gifted to him. He looks like a J. Crew model. He's married to Giselle, the wealthiest model in the world. And she's actually made more money over her career, over $560 million than Tom has. I think Tom's right at $275 right now. And so I think Tom he showed again like a relatability, and I think it increased his popularity. And then at the boat parade, you see him intoxicated on his $2 million yacht that he bought just a few days before the boat parade, and then getting inebriated, throwing the trophy, and again I think he's almost like the only person on the planet who can get away with public intoxication and actually increase people's affection for him because we're seeing a side of Tom, and also just sort of battling father time, doing this at age 43. It's really an incredible thing, and then Bruce becoming the oldest head coach to ever win a Super Bowl, and for Nebraska fans, I'll tell you, he absolutely loves Levante David. He's his favorite player on the defense. He's the leader of the defense. Whenever Bruce wants to sort of take the temperature of the defense, of the players, of their feelings, of their attitudes, he goes to Levante. And Bruce always does this with every team he's been on. He picks the most respected vet, and he establishes an incredibly close relationship. And it was Levante who kind of noted that Leonard Fournette during practices was sort of distancing himself from the rest of the team, and this was at the midway point of the year. And he sat through an entire walkthrough on a water cooler, and it was Levante who mentioned to BA that you need to talk to Leonard, and Bruce did. He went and said. And again, at this point in the season, Leonard was not getting many carries, just a few a game. And Bruce said, okay, here's the deal. He's like, I'm not mad at you. I'm not upset with you, but I'm not going to let you destroy my locker room. Mm-hmm. And you can go inside the facility, take 20 minutes, call whoever you need to call, and then you come back out here and you tell me to either cut you or you're all in. And so Leonard did that. He went inside, made a few phone calls, came back out and said, Coach, I'm good. And not even Bruce could have realized how vital Leonard was going to be. I mean, you could make the argument that Fournette really was the Bucs' offensive MVP for the entirety of the playoffs, and that went back to Levante having a conversation with Bruce.
Lars Anderson's with us, Hail Varsity Radio, A Season in the Sun, his new book, The Championship Run for Tampa Bay, Unparalleled Access with Bruce Arians and the Bucs. That's Levante. You talk to him, you talk to his teammates, past and current, and they will do anything for him because he does everything for them on the field, off the field. Playoff Lenny was huge. But the personalities that were acquired by also native Nebraskan Jason Light incredible. You bring in Antonio Brown. Here comes Gronk. Meanwhile, you've got Brady. Mike Evans has been great for a decade plus, and you add weapons, so it's not all on Evans' shoulders. Your offensive line stellar. You get Sue back. Or you add Sue to the roster, and Levante's always kind of been quietly killing it, and finally he got some exposure. Bruce is just magic, it sounds like, Lars, not only with the Fournette story, but just he's not afraid. He looks at the talent, and guys want to fit in and play with him, play for him.
Absolutely. And, when he took the job in 2019, he 100% thought that he could fix Jameis Winston. Bruce holds a football camp here in Birmingham, Alabama, and he got to know Jameis when Jameis was just, I think, in 9th grade. And they had sort of maintained a relationship over the years, and so Bruce thought he could turn Jameis into an elite quarterback, into a Pro Bowl quarterback, into a Super Bowl winning quarterback. But, Jameis ends up throwing 30 interceptions. That's more than any other quarterback has thrown in the 21st century. The last interception was just the dagger of 2019. He threw a pick six, and it was the quickest overtime game. It was on the first play of overtime. It was the quickest overtime game in NFL history. And Bruce just was saying, enough's enough. And they were really looking at Teddy Bridgewater. They thought that Bridgewater was going to be their guy. And then, all of a sudden Brady is having some issues, and they start hearing these sort of rumors coming out of New England that Brady could be available. And this guy, John Spytek, very important figure in the landing of Brady. He's a scout for Tampa, and he played with Brady for one season at Michigan. And he sort of through his own sources, own mutual friends with Tom, found out that, this is real. Like, he's ready to go. And on the first day of free agency, I think it opened at 4 o'clock. At 4 o'clock and 10 seconds, Jason Light, Nebraskan, who I absolutely adore. I love Jason Light. He's one of my favorite people on the planet. We have mutual friends. He knows Ted Wright. He used to be a bouncer at the Brass Rail. I got so many great stories. About Jason. But I'll get into that in a second. But at 4 minutes, 10 seconds, Jason calls Don Yee, who is Tom's agent, and Yee said, "You made the right call, Jason." And they went on to talk and said that, Tom's interested.
And now,
back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Continuing the best of Hail Varsity as we go and recap some of the best interviews over the past couple months here on Hail Varsity Radio. Let's continue on with our interview with Lars Anderson from back in May.
Lars Anderson continues on with us here, Hail Varsity Radio, on a Thursday. And Lars, tell me about that phone call between Jason Light, Bruce Arians, and when they got on the horn with Tom Brady.
3 days later, the first day that they could have talks with players, Jason drove over to BA's house, and again, they're both sort of former bartenders / bouncers. As one of them put it to me, before they called Tom, they got a little personality in them, and 5 seconds after free agency began, they called Tom. Tom answered the phone and said to Jason, "What's up, babe?" And right then, they knew they had him. And it was almost like Tom was pitching himself more than the Bucs had to pitch Tom, because Tom had already done his research. He knew about the wide receivers. He knew about the young, talented defense. He knew everything. He knew he wanted to be in a warm weather climate. He and Giselle were going to build their forever home, which they're doing right now in Miami. He knew that Derek Jeter's place, the biggest, it's a mansion. It's the biggest house in Hillsborough County, which Tampa is in. He knew that was vacant and that Jeter had offered, Jeter was going to be his landlord and he'd have to pay rent and everything, but he knew that was available. Just all the stars aligned. He wanted to play with Bruce, who I think, through talking with me and just knowing about Bruce, he's the anti-Belichick. I mean, Bruce, do you imagine Belichick having a tailgate out of the back of his car after every game? I mean, he couldn't do it this last year because of COVID-19, but that's what Bruce does. He wants his players to come by, and anybody who wants to come by, he'll give you a beer or make you a drink. He's so close with his players. He wants to know, about their personal lives. If they've ever have any problems, they can approach him. He's just a very approachable, likable guy, and you can't necessarily say those same personality characteristics apply to Belichick. But they knew from that very first phone call, Jason and Bruce, that they had their man. Yeah, and Tom could have asked for more money. I mean, I think it was a 2-year, $40 million. It was just recently renegotiated. But he could have asked for anything he wanted, and they would have given it to him. And then Tom, he was going to change his number because number 12 was worn by Chris Godwin, wide receiver, and Tom was going to change it to number 8. To number 7 because he wanted that 7th Super Bowl ring. But Godwin, being a pretty smart guy himself, knowing that he was coming into a contract year, he wanted to make sure that his quarterback felt very good about him. So he gave the number up he didn't charge Tom anything. You've heard these wild stories in the past where I think Clinton Portis paid like $35,000 to get the number 26 when he was with the Redskins. And you've heard all these crazy stories, but Godwin just gave the number over to him. But again, it took a while. First game out of the gate, Tom throws a pick 6. They get beat by New Orleans. They lose 3 out of 4 games going into the bye week. During the bye, Rob Ninkovich, who is a former Patriot and a teammate of Brady's, he goes on ESPN's Get Up and says that Arians should be fired. And Arians, and Bruce watched it. He saw it, and Arians is just like, this guy's got no idea what he's talking about. He doesn't know how close we are. And after the bye week, Bruce and Tom spent hours and hours just figuring out more about the playbook, trying to meld what Tom was comfortable with and what he was doing at New England with the Arians sort of way. And bam, they just take off from there, and they end up winning 8 straight in the Super Bowl. And look, they conquered Drew Brees, his final game. Brady says goodbye. They conquer Aaron Rodgers on the road. Aaron Rodgers may never play another game in Green Bay. Who knows? And then they conquer Patrick Mahomes in the Super Bowl. And the Super Bowl, it was just a masterful defense. From Todd Bowles, it was, to me, like the defensive coordinator was the sort of MVP of that. Tampa had blitzed on a percentage-wise more than any team in the NFL heading into that game. But because the Chiefs had both their left tackle and their right tackle were both injured, Bowles was confident that they could just get pressure with 4. Mahomes was hobbled a little bit with an ankle injury. And so Bowles sent fewer blitzes in that game than he had in the previous 7 years when he was presiding over a defense. So he was just totally out of character. They were going to double Tyreek Hill wherever he went. They were not going to let Tyreek Hill get behind them. And they also thought it was a big advantage if they played the Chiefs earlier in the year, because it's like you can see their speed on tape, but it's different kind of speed when it's on the field. So now they knew kind of what they were up against. But it's a really fun story, and the fact is now they have all 22 starters coming back. First time that's happened since 1977 with the Oakland Raiders. This team was just hitting its peak in the playoffs, and again, even though Brady's the sort of headliner, this is a team built by the defense. This is a team where the strength of it is the defense, and again, Bruce absolutely loves David, and he loves Sue, and Sue is still playing also at a very high level.
Well, Lars Anderson with us. Lars, that's fascinating about Bowles, and you got Shaq Barrett. He's a UNO kid till they disbanded the program, and he's a kid that was at Boys Town. So there's another Nebraska connection, but you got JPP and Barrett off the edge with Sue in the middle, and you didn't have to blitz, and they really took advantage of Kansas City and earned a title, and I know folks are still smiling about it. Is BA surprised they got it done this soon? I know they hit their peak, but usually it's a second-year deal after you kind of get your footing.
Absolutely. When they're at 7-5 at the bye week, when he had that long chat with Brady, he was thinking about trying to build momentum for 2021. He was not thinking about the Super Bowl. He told me that straight up. He was just trying to fix, because they lost 3 out of 4. And Tom often looked lost out there. There's just you can't deny that. Early in the season, he didn't know where his receivers were going to be. It hurt him because they missed OTAs. The Bucs offensive staff estimated that Tom missed something like 1,500 reps because of COVID-19. And not only that, literally thousands of more mental reps that he could have done with coaches. They're facing a big uphill battle. But everything was geared toward 2021, toward this upcoming season, not last season. Again, we saw them win their last 8 games, and none of them were really that close. Packers game, yes, questionable decisions by Matt LaFleur, but especially if Aaron Rodgers ends up leaving the NFC, I can't see the Rodgers thing getting resolved. It's either he goes or the general manager goes, and we'll have to see how that plays out. They are primed for another run, no question about it.
Miss us?
Come here, brother. Give me a hug. Bring it in for the real thing.
We're on call for you. Catch the podcast at hailvarsity.com, the ESPN Lincoln app, or download them on iTunes.
Saddle up, partner.
Back to Hail Varsity Radio.
It's Elijah Herbel back in here on a Tuesday. Hail Varsity Radio presented by the Nebraska Lottery. Chris Schmidt had an appointment today, so unable to make it in for the show. Instead, we decided to run a best of Hail Varsity Radio. If you've been listening today, thinking, wow, this information all sounds so old, that's because it is. We are taking you through some of the best interviews over the past couple months here on Hail Varsity Radio. Haven't had the chance to do this in a little bit. Thought a bye week for the Huskers would be a great chance to get one of these out of the way, as we have heard from Trev Alberts back in Hour 1. Our YouTube Tuesday sit down with him discussing the UCLA game back in 1993. We had Phil Steele, Jimmy Burroughs, and Lars Anderson most of this hour. Let's finish off this best of show with one last thought from Lars Anderson, a story about Bucs GM Jason Light's time working at the Brass Rail.
Lars, last thought here. I need a Jason Light bartending story from O Street back in the day.
Yes. Jason told me about a night that a intoxicated customer who he had turned away followed him to his Jeep. By the way, Jason, he cruised around town with a Jeep that didn't have a top on, even in the dead of winter. And he followed him to his Jeep and pulled a knife out on him. And the guy, and right at that moment, one of Jason's teammates from Nebraska arrived on the scene, and the guy lost grip of the knife. And let me just put it this way, the outcome didn't end well for the attacker. The snow on the ground was covered in blood, and it wasn't Jason. So, but he did tell me that, he kind of had to reevaluate where he was going with his life after that night.
Well, it's worked out well. Lars, best to you. We'll get caught up again. Congratulations. A Season in the Sun, the story of the Tampa Bay title run with Lars Anderson. Lars, when's this book come out?
It's hopefully going to be out late September, early October.
Well, we'll get a copy, and Nebraska fans, you'll love this read. Lars, take care, buddy.
All right, thanks, Chris. See you, bye-bye.
So we wrap up Hail Varsity here on a Tuesday. A reminder that we will be back live tomorrow. Will Wilson and myself taking you through a Wednesday before Chris planning on being back on a Thursday. And that Lars Anderson interview, good timing as Lars Anderson's book, A Season in the Sun, dropping today nationwide. So if that interview interested you and you want to go out and get a copy, you can do so now. A Season in the Sun detailing the Tampa Bay Buccaneers 2020 championship season. I actually didn't even know that when I selected that for the best of segment today. Went and looked it up while Lars was on and said, oh, wow, well, this was good timing, I guess, is Lars Anderson's book out today. You can go get that at Barnes & Noble or online. Lars Anderson, an author of 20 New York Times best-selling books. Again, if you missed any of the show today, it was a good best of show. Haven't got the chance to do this in a while. It's always fun to reminisce on some of our better interviews. You can go check this out online in podcast form, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, wherever you like to get podcasts. That includes ESPNLincoln.com, as well as Hail Varsity's YouTube page. It's another good place to go get it, as not a lot of people know about that one. Hail Varsity's YouTube page posts Hail Varsity Radio every single day. That's where you can check it out. We'll be back tomorrow. Will Wilson and myself, Chris Schmidt, will be back later in the week. It's Hail Varsity Radio presented by the Nebraska Lottery. We'll talk to you tomorrow.